I'd like you to welcome to Canada, to the University of Alberta, and to the TELUS Centre, Dr. John Byrne.
What I'd like to do today is I would like to share with you some of the things that have come out of the Kellogg Commission. I'd like to share with you some of the things I have experienced personally as a president of a university during some very difficult times. And we're going to focus primarily and almost exclusively on this whole question of, quote, engagement and what it means and how we relate the tremendous resources of a major public university to the needs and the challenges faced by society at large. And that's why we're here. Basically what we're here to, I suppose, address the philosophy that Thor Heyerdahl expressed. You know, he drifted across the Pacific on a balsa raft or so on. He said, what we're about is translating ideas into action to benefit people. And I think everybody in the university, that's why we're here. Universities are places of ideas, and what our challenge is to turn those ideas into action to benefit people everywhere. And that's what engagement is all about, isn't it? So that's what I'd like to talk about today. But we have to set the context, and so let me begin to do that. If I were to give this talk a title, it would be The Engaged University in a Learning Society. Because society has changed, and society from the one we knew, let's say, immediately post-World War II, is very different today than it was then. And so what I'd like to do first is I'd like to address this question of a learning society. What is a learning society? We have had universities throughout history, as it turns out. We have had new entities entering the whole business of higher education and learning opportunities fairly recently. A learning society, and you can look at these, and I'll address each one of these in a minute. But we have community colleges, we have for-profit universities now, we have corporate universities, we have the publics and the privates that you have here. In addition to that, museums, aquaria, television channels have all gotten into the learning business. And that's what we're really concerned about, is how do we enhance learning? How do we enhance this transfer of ideas into action for people? Well, a learning society does several things. First of all, it fosters lifelong learning. Now, immediately, most people think of lifelong learning as post-secondary. They think of it as continuing education, whatever it may be. Lifelong learning starts much earlier than that. It starts with birth. And so the degree to which universities are engaged in lifelong learning has to look at enhancing childhood development. Probably the most important element on the whole thing, the development of the human brain at a time when it is developing most rapidly, enhancement of childhood. But anyway, a learning society addresses lifelong learning. It's socially inclusive. That means it includes everybody. That everybody has the opportunity to learn. That's the society we live in today. It ensures equity of access. As soon as you turn on the television set, you have created an equity of access, at least for those kinds of things. It stimulates new knowledge. And where do we turn? Where do we turn when we want new knowledge? Most often, at least in the country that I come from, we turn to our public universities, and to some degree to the private universities. The universities are the engines of research and the creation of new knowledge, although not exclusively. And those of you who are not from the university know that. And those of us in the university have to recognize that you know it and that you are creating new knowledge as well. So we stimulate, in a learning society, a number of organizations stimulate new knowledge, designed to improve the social and economic well-being of the society. In your case, I suppose, of the province, of the nation, and of the world, certainly. And in order to do this, we promote things that perhaps we haven't done too much with in the past. Regional and global linkages. Looking for partners that can help in this whole development of turning ideas into actions to benefit people. And then finally, that's the society that the University of Alberta is in today. And that's society where we have to think a little bit about what is it that we want the University of Alberta to be and to have that role with the society. And so that's basically, this is context. This is what we're talking about. Now, in 1995, or thereabouts, the Kellogg Commission on the Future of States and Land-Grant Universities was created in the United States. And as Gerry said, it consisted of about 25 presidents who came together to address 5 topics. The student experience, they came together to address the question of access to a successful life in a civilized society, not just access to the university. The third thing they addressed was the engaged institution, which is what we're here to talk about today. They addressed the whole business of lifelong learning and a learning society. And then finally, we looked at campus culture. If you're going to bring about change, you're going to change the culture. And frequently, the culture may be one of the impediments to bringing about change. On the other hand, if you do change, you will automatically change the culture. So those were the 5 things that we're going to address. And from all that, we produced some, as has been pointed out, a number of reports that addressed each of those issues. I came up with what I say were referred to as the basic ideals on which the University of the Future must be based. And if you come tomorrow, you'll hear about these in greater detail. But I need to mention them because they apply to engagement. And so, first of all, is the access for all. We can skip right by now. And they must be genuine learning communities. What this means is that we all learn from each other. We learn from people outside the university. Faculty learn from their secretaries. The secretaries learn from the faculty. The students learn from everybody. They must be student-centered. Now, students and faculty don't like the term customers, whatever, clients, whatever it is. Call them students. They must be student-centered. They must produce healthy learning environments. Must be engaged with society, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But there are 2 more that are critically important in the future. We must emphasize moral and social values. We have not done an adequate job of doing that. And we must actively promote civil societies on a global basis. That's a responsibility of the University of the Future. Well, what we would like to do now is we'd like to talk about this whole question of engagement, of what does it really mean? Now, this came out, in a sense, of the, I suppose, the extension movement, the land-grant movement in the United States, the recognition that we are, as public universities, created to help the public. And our first engagement certainly starts with students, and we'll come back to this in a minute. But engagement with society, as the Kellogg Commission envisioned it, starts, and the key word, as you will note here in just a minute, is shared. Shared goals. We sit down together, people inside and outside the university, and decide what our collective goals will be. And on the basis of that, we create some specific objectives, and we do this together. We share our expertise. It is not all in the university, it is not all outside. And by coming together, we more than double it. We create all sorts of wonderful serendipitous activities if the expertise comes together. And we share resources. And these things are nothing new. We've been doing these as universities and as communities for a long, long time. But the key there is a sharing, a mutual agreement that we can work together. That yes, we come from different perspectives, but how do we bring what our expertise is, what our resources are, how do we bring these together to solve the needs of people in society? And we're part of the society. So what do we do? Well, the Kellogg Commission came up with 7 guidelines for engagement, a way to measure yourself, I suppose, and I'd like to run through these with you. The first one is responsiveness. When we collectively, sharing now, identify something that society needs, that the Edmonton community needs, or the province needs, whatever it may be, how do we respond to that? Do we ignore it? Do we think about it? Do we respond? Do we listen adequately? It involves respect for partners. One of the biggest, I can say this now, I'm retired, one of the biggest problems with university faculty is, in many cases, arrogance. There is a snobbishness that some faculty have about thinking that they know more than other people do, and they may. But they may. So we need to respect each other in terms of the sharing. Academic neutrality, that's the third one. Now we all bring our own biases to a problem, and the bias is based on our experience. So we can separate bias from prejudice. We don't want the prejudice to enter in. And it's amazing how difficult that is. It's amazing how difficult it is to write a statement on the basis of something which you have just discovered, something that's brand new, and not bias the way you say it so that it carries a message that you emotionally think is important. Accessibility. Universities are very complex places. And for somebody outside, you can be intimidated by trying to approach the university. So we need to find a way to make our institutions accessible to people who are not normally comfortable on being on a university campus. And when you consider the resources that are available, this is incredibly important. It's incredibly important that we don't have some sort of a built-in barrier that creates an apprehension as we come in from outside, or vice versa, for the faculty member to go to some organization in the community that he's unfamiliar or she's unfamiliar with, and try to help solve a problem. Integration. Universities do lots of things. There are many, many disciplines, there are many, many areas of expertise in the institution. How do we integrate those to address a specific problem, challenge, or opportunity? An opportunity that society might benefit from. How do we integrate those? And then we need to know what each other are doing. The left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing. The faculty of extension needs to have some idea as to what's going on in the faculty of engineering, and vice versa. And so there's got to be some coordination here. And that, that as you begin to look at these things, and you begin to see, okay, there are ways that universities can structure themselves or can add structures that will help in identifying each of these guys. And then finally, we need to be willing to share resources. There are pieces of equipment that faculty would love to be able to operate with that only the private sector can provide. Conversely, there are probably laboratories on campus that for one important reason or another could be used by something that's significant to society if we open ourselves up. Now there's a risk involved. There is a risk involved. As we are opening ourselves up as we do these things. And that involves confidence, which we must have. When we did the engagement report, and I don't know whether any of you have seen it, I know some of you have. This is the Engaged Institution report. And for each of these, when the Kellogg Commission was doing these, we tried to put together a data report that would go with it, where we would summarize a compilation of all sorts of data that existed. We couldn't find any on engagement, so we took a different tack on it. We identified 7 different kinds of universities, and we asked them to do a little case study of what engagement meant to them. And that's included here. There are a variety of things that people do. And possibly in the question and answer period, we can kind of pull out some of those things. But as a result of looking at what those 7 institutions did, we found that there were certain characteristics of an institution that was truly engaged. And the first of those was that there was an institutional commitment to engagement. And what that means when you come right down to it is that it appears, the whole philosophy, the whole concept of engagement appears at every opportunity, starting with the mission statement of the institution. Is there something in there that shares that idea of engagement? Is engagement infused in the curriculum? Are we doing things across the board? Now, this doesn't mean in every course or in every particular little program, but do you see things in your curriculum that is preparing students for life outside the campus that involves them outside the campus as part of their educational development through the curriculum? We find that the institutions used a variety of different approaches, did all sorts of things. At Columbia, they had extension agents. They sent people off campus. One institution used their drama department to send some of the staff and the students around the state to share the art of drama. You have to identify the communities you're trying to serve, and well defined. Otherwise, you become diffuse and you kind of waffle and slide around. There's the tough one. There's the tough one. Stable funding for engagement. That's part of the commitment. That means that the provost has set up some sort of an account by which people who want to initiate something in engagement can turn to him or her, as it may be, and say, you know, we have this great idea of how we can be involved with the community, but we need a little bit of money to get it started. The money's there, and of course, once it's there, then you can probably find money outside. And then you need accountability. Somebody has to be responsible. Somebody that you can turn to. Yeah. Where does the bottom line stop when it comes to engagement? And then the dimension which is essential in anything you do which is new, anything which you do which is successful, it's called leadership. And it happens at every level. It happens at the staff level, at the faculty level. You have student leaders, you have people that you have assigned as leaders, and they have a position that tells you what it is. Okay, what are the strategies for engagement, at least the ones that the Kellogg Commission identified? The first one is that you need to have a plan. You need to sit down and think about what it is you want to do and how you're going to do it, and lay it out. Now, a plan includes not only steps, but usually also a timeline, a schedule. And as many of us discovered, nothing ever gets done without a deadline. And nothing ever gets done without an objective or a goal, or nothing worthwhile. You got to encourage interdisciplinary activities. The problems that society has are not disciplinary; they're multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary. You know, the old gag: society has problems and universities have departments. So somehow you've got to encourage it, and you're probably doing all these things. You need to create incentives. Incentives for faculty are probably, at least in their minds, the most overworked people on your campus. Just ask one. And so we need to have incentives for them. We need to have a reason for them to say, hey, rather than do this, I'd like to try that. And there's a reason for doing it. We need to secure, as I hear it comes again, secure stable funding. And I don't know how you're going to do that. And then, of course, the key is the obvious commitment. It's part of the core mission of the university. So working on engagement. And we began to realize that we're talking about some different things now. We're talking about basically redefining the mission of the university. And as we were talking about the whole business of student experience, a lot of focus on teaching. I said, no, that's not what's important. Teaching's not important. Doesn't that shock you? Anybody shocked by that statement? Thank you. Teaching's not important. Learning is important. Learning is important. Teaching is only a way to enhance learning. And again, we could spend the next hour talking about that. But learning is what's important. That's why we're here. We're here to change what happens in the individual mind, to enhance the capability to continue to learn on his or her own. That's what's important. I had one colleague, I couldn't believe this, at Oregon State. He said, I couldn't understand it. I was doing a great job teaching, but they weren't getting it. So learning is important. Creation of new knowledge is important, isn't it? What do we call that? We usually call it research. But it's almost, in many cases, as important to use existing knowledge in new ways. That's application, I suppose. And so as the commission began to talk about it, they said research and application, we're going to have a new word for that. Let's call it discovery. To see a student all of a sudden get it, that's the excitement of discovery. To see a faculty member learn something that nobody in the universe has ever known before. It's pretty exciting stuff, it's discovery. So learning and discovery are part of the mission of a university. But so is engagement. And the engagement is the sharing of what we have learned and the way we do it with people outside the university. The first group that we look at are the students who come in from outside. So we have learning and discovery and engagement. And what you discover is that as soon as you get involved, you know what learning's about, as soon as you get involved in discovery, you learn something, don't you? And as soon as you're getting involved with engagement and sit down with somebody that you haven't sat down with before and share ideas, you learn something. So it's all part of the same learning thing. So really what we're talking about is an evolving mission that goes from teaching plus research plus service, which has been the traditional mission, to one of integrated learning, discovery, and engagement. And if it's important, and we care about students, then they should be involved in all three of those things. You have to ask yourself, to what degree are they involved? So, as we begin to look at this whole question of engagement here, we're looking at something which is fundamental to the modern public university, and in fact, to the private university, to all universities. Virtually every major university, public or private, is engaged in one way or another with its public. And what we're concerned about is what's the best way to do that. Now, the underlying thing, the concluding thing I would say to you is that it requires leadership. And that is, I had a colleague who had this little thing on his desk. He says, if it's to be, it's up to me. And that's leadership. And it happens at every level. And you had one of the greatest leaders that I know, a philosopher that I frequently refer to, and I'll refer to him tomorrow, who spent some time in Edmonton, I understand, and modern 20th century philosopher. His name was Wayne Gretzky. Anybody ever hear Wayne? You know, this, if there's anybody in this audience who doesn't know who Wayne Gretzky is, please leave. You know, I can go through the United States and I can say, you know, Wayne Gretzky, and you're thinking, first cello in the Minnesota Symphony. No, that wasn't him. You know. In any case, but anyway, Wayne Gretzky said one thing which was so important to leadership, because leadership involves taking a risk. And the phrase that I use, and I'll conclude with, Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. And we can't afford not to take those shots. Thank you very much.